If you're interested in shadow work, A, be kind to yourself. Don't start this when you're not, because it won't go the way that it won't go in a positive way. And B, follow your intuition. Let that be your guide.
Yeah.
And there are so many resources out there for you to be able to take advantage of, but make it a curated experience for yourself.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Optimizing Human Potential podcast. There are millions of things we can learn, and one of those things is the power of human potential to change your life. There are ever-changing rules to how we can act and interact. This show is designed to stay on the cutting edge of how we as humans can optimize every minute. And we can bring you the experts who help you optimize your human potential. Life is exactly what you make of it, so let's make ours perfect. Live in 3, 2.
Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is John here. This is, or Jock, whatever you know me as. This is Optimizing Human Potential, brought to you by the Holistic Network or the Holistic Therapies Directory. Today, I've got a great guest, a great friend of mine, and an academic colleague who has been, her and I have known each other for quite a while, a number of years now. And we're going to have a great conversation all about shadow work, your shadow nature. Now, shadow nature, to me, in shadows, we think about shadows, we think about in photography, how we raise the shadows, drop the highlights, we play with it. There's an element in everything that we do. Whether you take an image or even yourself, how you see a shadow from yourself, or you see a shadow cast on the wall, the sun's behind, we cast a shadow, but your shadow nature goes so much deeper. And it's an element that I don't really like doing, as you'll find out very, very soon. My guest today is my good friend, Arti, who is, as I said, is my colleague, and we're going to have a great conversation around shadow work. And if any of you have ever done shadow work before, you'll know that it's not as easy as it seems. Arti, welcome to Optimizing Human Potential.
Thank you so much, Jock. I appreciate you having me here.
I'm excited to have you because I've got to watch because I've got cameras everywhere. So I've got a habit of looking at the wrong camera. And so if I do that, just ignore it. We've known each other for quite a while. I'm excited to get you on. And this is your first episode you've ever done on a podcast, isn't it?
That's right.
And this is exciting because I've been trying to pushing you to do something like this for ages. But you and I know each other from Liverpool John Moore University, where we're both doing a Master's of Science in Transpersonal Psychology. And of course, part of that work is challenging ourselves as a transpersonal journey. Why did you choose your subject matter? I know that you're doing your dissertation on shadow work, but what is it that you love about this element of psychology?
Well, it's interesting that you ask, Jock. So when we began this program through Liverpool John Moore's, one of the first modules that we embarked upon was called Learning Through Integrative Process. And it forced us to really take a look at ourselves, whether it be on an emotional, psychological, spiritual, transpersonal, physical level, and incorporate different modalities or new things that could kind of help us along in our journey. Initially, I found that to be a bit of a challenging experience. And we were asked to choose um, something within each of those categories that might be able to help us. I landed on shadow work because I thought that I could fake my way through it. And it turned out to be the biggest surprise of all.
You could fake your way through it, unbeknownst to you that, yeah, that's not quite the case.
That's right. That's right. When we embarked on that module, I grabbed the first shadow book workbook that I could find at a thrift store and threw it in a corner and thought, I'll get to that and I'll just fill it out and I'll be fine. And as I sat down, I realized that, oh, my shadows are really prevalent here. And I think I've got an issue.
So, wait, let me ask you this though: were you interested in shadow work? Did you know anything about shadow work before you started on this academic research? Were you interested in it before, Arti?
I'm glad you asked me that because it's something that I can look back on now. I don't think I had the vocabulary to use the word shadow work prior to beginning this program. But it had been brought up in my therapy sessions. And at one point, I had been through a traumatic event and had PTSD. As I was working through all of that, my therapist said to me, "Oh, well, I feel that you've graduated now and you don't have PTSD anymore." And I looked at her and I said, "You know, I'm really glad you're by my side here because I'm ready to open that Pandora's box." And I did not recognize that that was the shadow work that I was embarking on.
And when you started doing that, obviously you've got deeper into it as we've gone through the kind of academic research. But when you were in therapy from your traumatic event, um, which we're not going to talk about, but you've opened up, but we know about that. So I will let you know, ladies and gentlemen, that it's a very, very traumatic event that would paralyze a lot of people. So what you've come through is absolutely phenomenal. Um, but what was your feeling when you started this journey and you started to think, okay, I'm going to work with my shadow? What was coming up for you? I mean, because there's so many people that I've met and they'll say, oh yeah, I've looked at my shadow, I do shadow. I mean, I hate it, right? I've said that to you many times. I don't want to do that. But what was it? What was the pivotal moment for you that went, wow, this is my shadow nature, and I this is not as easy, or this is harder than I thought.
Yes, absolutely. That's it's very interesting because in hindsight, I can say that I had that moment. And I think it was, kind of at the end of that, the therapy with the PTSD,
Yeah.
and I started examining my relationships with my family, with my friends. And I realized that I was really unhappy in many ways. And my therapist helped me to recognize that if you're unhappy, you can't change the world. All you can do is change yourself. And
Oh,
that,
that's profound.
yeah.
Yeah.
And it really propelled me deeply into what I was calling that Pandora's box, not necessarily having that vocabulary of shadow work as the Jungian term. But I knew she's very Jungian, so I knew that's what she was trying to point me towards. But it's one of those things that until you've done it and you've recognized the benefits of having gone through shadow work, not only gone through shadow work in terms of examining your shadow, but integrating it and allowing for true healing to take place. That's when I realized through our course that it was something very powerful and almost addictive in a way once you start to recognize the benefits.
It is, because I think we get to the point, Artie, that obviously we all have a shadow is part of us. We know that, but whether you want to face it or not is another thing. And I want to. So, if for anybody who's listening out there doesn't understand what shadow work is, because we're talking here like a couple of psychologists who are like just rapping away Hungian psychology or Jungian, wherever you come, if you're from Scotland, Jungian. Um, let's explain to people what shadow work is so they
Yes,
understand it. Because there's people out there going to listen to this and they're going like, I don't know what they're talking about.
absolutely. And I think shadow work is it's misunderstood. It
Yeah.
really, according to Jung, who coined the term, it is acknowledging those fragmented parts of yourself, those the things we keep in the shadows. So let me put it in really simple terms. If something, for example, triggers you, that's a perfect place to start your shadow work and ask yourself, why does it trigger me? What is in there that I'm not able to face? And
Yeah.
it doesn't have to be, it's often associated with a dark side, with the shadow,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
without light, there is no shadow.
That's
So
right.
it's not just understanding it; it's really owning it. So I'll give you an example. When we first started on that module, I had a really hard time with shadow work, and I couldn't understand why. Um, the workbook that I was using, because I was trying to do it on my own, with the guidance of my therapist, but I thought, I can, yeah, if I can fake it on my
Yeah.
own, this is great. But as I started working through the workbook, you have to put pen to paper and you have to write down your deepest, darkest, most inner thoughts.
Yeah, you do.
Uh, and I could not do that for the life of me. I could not write down what I truly felt. Um, I was watching a video about something unrelated during that time, and somebody said, write it down like nobody's going to read it. They were talking about writing a script for some film or something like that. And I thought, oh, well, let me apply that to my life. Let me write it down as though nobody else is going to read this. And I couldn't Jock. I actually had to do
Wow.
shadow work behind that. And as it turned out, my problem stemmed from my childhood. And there were a lot of shadows to be uncovered there. When I was a young
Right.
child, my sister, I had one of those little diaries, with the lock and key.
Yeah.
And I'd gotten it for Christmas one year. I think it was about 10 or 11 years old. I was so happy. Within a couple of months, my sister broke it open and not only read it, but read it out loud to all of her friends. And that was the pivotal moment in my life where I decided that I could not trust writing down anything.
Wow. So the journaling aspect of your shadow work was actually a big momentous,
Yes.
a pivotal moment for you as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I couldn't do the shadow work without the journaling, considering the point I was at, because I was trying to do a lot of it on my own. I mean, it is possible with the help of a therapist or a somatic counselor. There are many professionals out there who can help you with that. But it is something that you're able to explore on your own as well. It's just nice to be able to have that extra
Yeah.
support when you need it.
How does somebody that's out there who is struggling psychologically with either trauma or something else, what advice would you give them to start looking at their shadow nature, and how would you get them to start? Because you've mentioned that for you it was a hurdle, it was a wall to climb,
It was,
and
yes.
which you're probably still doing, you're still
Mhm.
climbing and still getting over those hurdles. Um, what advice would you give to someone who's look they're interested in it? Because and well, so I guess actually let's reverse back before we even tell them how to start. What is the benefits, right? What is the benefits of someone looking and working with a shadow? Because like I've said to you many a time, I know I need to do it, and I've done it. But it's hard for even me to look at my shadow nature because like you're almost reflecting, "Oh, I don't like that, and I don't like feeling like that, and I don't like feeling that emotion." So let's tell people what's the benefits that you've got out of it personally, and what do you think someone would get out of it that they're interested in working with shadow?
Well, there are so many benefits. There hasn't been enough research done on this, which is part of what my dissertation is about. Um, but I believe that the biggest benefit that people would find is that they become more self-confident. They become authentic and true to who they are. You no longer have these fragmented parts of yourself that, whether it comes through something you're ashamed of or something that is emotionally too much for you to deal with, and you've swept it under
Yeah,
the rug all these years. So looking at shadow work is really going back and examining your psyche and trying to determine what makes me tick, what makes me do the things I do. Maybe it was something back in my childhood. Maybe it was generational.
right.
Maybe it was just something that happened to me a few weeks ago with a friend, and I've decided, oh, I'm not, like it's too much for me to handle. Um, it's never too late to start dealing with your shadow, but it's also not a one and done process. It's a
It's an
lifetime.
ongoing thing.
Yeah, because it's
Mm.
taken you so many years of conditioning and layering to create this person that you are. You have to give yourself a little break and be compassionate with yourself as you're peeling back those layers, and it feels very raw.
So what I'm hearing you saying is also that you can't expect to work with your shadow nature and it just be done with and dealt with. There's going
That's
to
right.
be a repetition. There's it's going to continually keep coming up. But
Absolutely.
if somebody's working with that and they've got an issue and it keeps coming up, well, how would you say to them, at what point do they get to that, I'm finally dealing with it, or it doesn't affect me anymore?
That's a very personal feeling to have, and only you can know if you've adequately dealt with your shadows. Your shadow will keep cropping up until you have, in different forms, through a different medium, a different experience, but it will repeat until you've resolved that. The quickest way for me, I found, is just to look at my triggers and say, oh, if something is triggering me, I haven't dealt with that.
See, I love now you talking about triggers, because I talk about triggers a lot in grief, as you know, because that's the side of research that I work in. But then it then begs a question: if you're going to be triggered by your shadow, is there a danger to it? Like, can that trigger cause more imbalance? Could it cause psychosis? Is there a warning that someone going into the shadow work that they're doing, or even in this research, is there an ethical dilemma to it as well? Is there a potential for it to be triggering a negative?
I believe that it can, which is why anyone who is working with their shadow, it's so beneficial to have somebody on standby, a backup, a therapist, or a
Yeah.
counselor, or a somatic worker to help you through the process, because you can come face to face and confront some things that perhaps you're not ready to. So that part is really important, depending on which aspect of your shadow that you're working with. Generally, our shadow doesn't allow us to process or even face anything that we're not ready to. We tend to shut
Oh,
down.
that's interesting.
Yeah, we tend to
I
shut
never
down.
thought of that.
Our bodies, it's often somatic. You can feel it in
I
your
was going
body.
to, so
Feel
that
it
was my next thing,
tightness.
because
Yes, you
yeah,
feel
it's
tightness in your
somatic in your
chest.
body.
Yeah, so you can sense that. There are certain parts of my shadow self that I'm still working on, but I notice that tightness in my shoulders and my chest when I start
Right.
thinking about it. Um, my mind automatically wants to swerve to a different topic. I don't quite want to go there just as yet. And my best advice to anyone would be, just do what you're comfortable doing. You do have to push yourself a little bit with shadow work if you want to take it seriously, and you do want to explore it as much as possible, but be your own guide. Don't push yourself beyond those boundaries until you're ready.
It kind of reminds me of that story. Oh, wait a minute, I got to get it wrong now. I think it's the turtle. A turtle's one of the only animals that sheds its shell, but because it has to get uncomfortable to then get to being comfortable, because can't breathe, it starts to feel tight in its shell, and it has to retreat and shed its skin. Or a lobster, maybe a lobster, actually, not a turtle, a lobster, and they shed the shell, and then they have to regrow another one. Is that a good analogy as well for shadow work?
That's a great analogy. Nobody can be forced to do shadow work. It is one of those things that has to come from inside of you. If you're not ready to face your shadow side,
Unless you're going through academic research and they force it as a
unless
module. Yeah.
you can do your best to fake your way through it, but I can tell you, I attest that does
Yeah,
not work.
yeah. Yeah, I tried that myself. Doesn't work. But I get it. It is a good analogy for it. Now, you're obviously are really interested in this. There's a missing link in this shadow nature and this shadow work. Let's talk a little bit about that missing link, because there's so many experts out there
Yes,
in the holistic world that teach shadow work, doing this. But I guess if you don't really understand it, how could you really teach it?
absolutely. And that was one of the things I really appreciated about our master's program and this learning through integrative process. Learn to put on your own oxygen mask before helping others. Was
Yeah.
the the lesson that I took away from that. And it was very beneficial for me because unless you've embodied it, it's really difficult to teach it, as you say. One of the things that I've noticed throughout my own journey through my shadow work, as well as all the research that I've been doing for my dissertation, is that there is a missing link, as you mentioned. So there's the element of the shadow, the aspects of us that are fragmented, that are disowned, that we want to face. And then there's our bodies. Why do we have a visceral reaction to certain things? Why do you get that churning in your stomach or that tightness in your chest when you hear a particular person talk? There's something there that's bothering you, but why is it that your body is having that kind of reaction first? So that fascinated me as I've been exploring this topic because I feel like that's the missing link is that our and there are several experts out there like Gabor Mate or Bessel van der Kolk, and they talk about how the body holds on to a lot of trauma. Now, don't confuse trauma and shadow work; it's not always the same.
I was
But
going to ask you that because this is the thing. Everybody seems to label it.
absolutely.
It's you only do shadow work if you've gone through trauma.
It doesn't have to be a traumatic thing. It can
Yeah,
just,
that's what. Yeah,
I happen to be a certain way, and I don't want to be that way anymore. I'll give you an example. Well, maybe it's not the best example, but because it's about people pleasing, and people pleasing tends to be viewed as a dark thing. But it's not really traumatic. It's just something that I grew up with culturally in my family. uh, Eldest child, you're the people pleaser. And as a result, I've noticed my entire life I've had issues with sciatica. And so I'll tell you a story. A couple of years ago, I was listening to a podcast with this well known film director. He was telling a story about his wife and how she decided a few years ago to start coming onto set. And she'd never done that before. So she started coming onto set and she would get mad at him and she'd say, What's your problem? Why are you always yelling at people all day long? They're doing their jobs, they're doing the best they can." And he said, "Well, I'm the director. I have to do this. This is my job." And she said, "Oh, for example, this morning you got mad at these guys. They were already feeling bad. You getting mad at them didn't help. Like it wasn't going to make the job get done any faster." So she was trying to reason with him. So he said, "Okay, fine." He said, "I will not yell anymore." And he said, "That's the day that my sciatica issues began." And he's had them ever since. And it's because it wasn't just he was holding it all inside and he wasn't releasing anything. So
right.
my takeaway after that was I need to yell at everybody. I came home and I announced to the family, I'm just going to become this yeller because that will help my sciatica. It was a joke. But as I went in a little bit deeper, I found that for me, it was a lot of people pleasing. I have sciatica on my right hip, which is also associated um, with some forms of trauma. It can be, especially women who have experienced sexual trauma do tend to have that kind of pain. For me, it was not not expressing myself and not having my throat chakra open, not being able to communicate. So my people pleasing tendencies involved silencing myself to appease everybody else, and so I stopped doing that. Over it took a couple of years. I'll be honest; it was not an overnight miracle, and I haven't had any sciatica issues since then. So that
That's
really
amazing.
yeah, it really demonstrated to me that there's obviously a link here between the body and the mind. We know that, but
Yeah.
this just really grounded that for me. And some of my research has also found that the fascia we have, and that is, the connective tissue,
Yeah.
kind of keeps everything together outside of our organs and skin and everything. It's this matrix, this web, and it has these neuroreceptors, which are they really listen to what's going on in your body and they tend to hold on to things. So sometimes you can have a reaction to something, or, for example, a lot of people say this, I didn't need to say anything, but my face showed it. because that's your normal reaction to something bad or
Well,
unpleasant that occurs.
I'm a great believer in that your behavior can talk louder volumes than your mouth can. And
Yes,
you show it in your, and so even in the work that I do as well, not in mediumship or anything, but in other types of work, you're looking at behavioral analysis, you're looking at how their behavior is, and that shows you can identify someone's story just by the things they don't say.
absolutely. And even those micro movements that they make,
Yeah.
or that second or two before they speak and react, the expression on their face, because they're trying to hold it all together, but you can see the underlying current there, that there is something happening.
You mentioned before that obviously Carl Jung was the person who's kind of coined this phrase, and you've mentioned Van der Volk, The Body Keeps a Score, which is a fascinating book. It's really good. And the German,
Oh,
God,
Gabor Mate.
no, not Gabor Mate. God, I must have to show my age. It was concentration camp. Anybody who's listening out there, I've had a brain fart, so feel free in the comments to tell me who I'm talking about, what I'm thinking about. But he was in a German concentration camp. Man, search Viktor Frankl. Nobody need to write in. Viktor Frankl, I think, also perhaps covers a lot of that shadow nature and stuff in his work. Where I think finding meaning in
Yes,
life and finding meaning. So I think my question to you then is, can you find meaning in your shadow?
absolutely. I mean, I think that's the point. I think that's the
Right,
magic,
right,
the magic spot that you reach,
right.
once you've owned your shadows. And by owning, I mean really not sweeping anything under the rug, but really saying, no, this is who I am. My faults, my strengths, everything. I'm
Is that
a
coming to a level of acceptance, Arti? Is that like you
It
accepting
is.
your shadow?
Absolutely, absolutely. And as you own those shadow aspects, you end up with a clarity that I have not experienced, honestly, in my many 50 plus years on this planet. I have not experienced any of that without shadow.
Our shadow, you know that, because we won't mention our ages and the fact that we forget things as well. It was like, yeah, it's possibly a part of the shadow we don't want to look at.
Absolutely,
It's
absolutely.
interesting as we're talking about this. Look at this, guys. Look at the light and the shadow,
Yes,
right? It just shows
I
you
love
that
that
there's polar opposites with this. And to me,
completely.
that, I mean, not I'm saying I look beautiful, but to me, light and dark has a beauty in it. So I
It's
guess there's also a beauty in dealing with your shadow.
Absolutely. And I really feel that once you have dealt with your shadow side, um, and as I said, it is a lifelong process. So there's not a beginning and an end here. But once you've embarked on that journey, you end up becoming very authentic and true to who you are. You're not filtering yourself for the sake of other people
Yeah.
because you understand yourself quite well. And you accept that I'm not perfect, and that's okay. But if somebody comes to you and says, "You're a jock,"
Oh, sorry to interrupt, but it reminds me of that Japanese art, kintsugi,
yes,
right? That's kind of, I think, indicative of what you're saying, because you're broken, but beautiful is beautiful when you put it back together
absolutely,
again. So your
absolutely,
shadow's kind of helping you put yourself back together again.
in a more beautiful way than you could have been before, because you've learned these lessons along the way, and it
Yeah, I'm
makes
still
you.
learning.
I think we all are, but I feel that authentic state that you're in once you have owned your shadow side puts you in a state of flow, and that state of flow just makes life a lot easier. It shows you all of the synchronicities that happen and how everything really is meant to be as it is.
So would you also say that it's intuitive? There's an
It is.
intuitive process to it.
Yes, absolutely. This is why I don't, as much as I do appreciate all of the literature, all of these workbooks and different ways to approach your shadow side, it's something that cannot be you can be guided, but it's not something that is taught like, like, math. It's very intuitive. You have to first of all trust yourself to
Do you know what?
follow
That's
the
so
definite path.
true because I say when I'm teaching or doing any lecturing at all, I talk about discernment. And I
Yes.
said, discernment's not something you learn from a book or a course. Discernment is something that has to grow with you and you have to work at it and it has to evolve just as you evolve. I'm a great believer, we from the formless, we became form. So our shadow, although it is not form,
Yeah,
it's from the formless, it's energy and nature, if you like. But we're reflective because we feel solid at the moment, but we break ourselves down. We're just the same animating force that animates the shadow, animates life, animates everything.
absolutely. You hit it. Yep. That's exactly what it is.
But and you mentioned something though. There's so many workbooks and there's so many courses out there that certificated in shadow work or go on this course and learn how to do. But you're basically saying, well, it's a lifelong process. You can't really learn it from there. You can maybe only get the tools.
Yes, absolutely. These books are very good, to give
Yeah.
you an introduction, but you really have to pick and choose because shadow work is extremely personal. It's extremely intuitive, and it's not something that is a one size fits all. So you're going to have to probably go through, like I did, several of these books. If you wanted to examine your shadow carefully, and really gain some knowledge from this and tailor
By the way,
it.
ladies and gentlemen, Arti will be writing her book very soon. She's in the process, which will be published and probably about
Thanks,
shadow
Jock.
work and everything else to do with that. Just thought I'd throw that in there. So as this is public, she's now tied down to doing that process.
Thanks for twisting my rubber arm into everything, Jock.
I do. So I want to kind of get back because I find Jung is incredible, right? But incredibly difficult to understand, right?
Mhm.
So surely you wouldn't say anybody who wants to start to work with a shadow to go and start to delve into Carl Jung because it's a really hard journey. Is there somewhere that you would recommend this is how you should start?
Yes, there is. I agree. Don't don't go and buy Carl Jung's books and start reading those unless that's something that you're absolutely interested in. Take it from Jock and I. But there are several different ways you can begin. I have worked with people who have begun with workbooks, with their therapist, with just going onto TikTok and looking up shadow work. For I've worked with a person who actually put it into ChatGPT or one of those AI search engines. I am interested in doing shadow work. Where do I begin? And that's how they began. I think you have to work with whatever resonates with you. If you're not a fan of going through workbooks and
Yeah.
working section by section, don't do that. If you don't want to watch a YouTube video on doing it, don't do that. Do whatever appeals to you, whatever makes it easy for you. It's I'm
It's
not going.
interesting because I've found that some of the videos and some of the things that I've watched to do even some research into it, they're coming from very much their own perspective
Yes,
and an expectation and tend to teach that based on their own perspective and expectation. But literally what you're saying is you can't go by that. It's got. Do you think it's a calling? Do you think it's a calling in nature to challenge your shadow?
I think we all have it within us. Uh, it's it. We have to be. Yes, absolutely. I mean, we all have to be called to examine our shadows.
How does somebody know? How does somebody know that they need to work with their shadow?
Am I allowed to swear on here? No.
Yeah, go for it. It's a podcast. We just go beep.
When you get tired of your own shit.
Right? Yeah,
If you're tired of your own shit,
Arti, that's not really swearing. I thought you were going to really cuss. And that's really posh. It's like,
No, it's true.
it's when you're tired of it.
It's when you're tired of it. I got tired of my own bullshit. And that's the day I decided I needed to examine my shadow, because I couldn't keep living in this loop where I was unhappy and working towards goals, but I kept having obstacles come in my way, but they were the same obstacles, just in a
Right.
different form each time. And, 50 years of my life went by, and it's only in the last 5 years that I've started looking at it and saying, well, hold on one second here. This doesn't work for me anymore. And I don't know how it worked for me for these 50
Do
years,
you
but
regret?
I
Do you
regret it.
regret not doing it earlier?
Well, of course, but hindsight is 2020, and well, regret is a strong word. I wouldn't say regret, simply because I wasn't prepared
Right.
prior to that time. I had to go
When should
through.
someone start then? Let me ask you this then. When should someone start to work with their shadow?
The online network for coaches and holistic entrepreneurs. Join us today and advertise your practice 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
The minute they get tired of
Your
dealing
own
with
shit.
their own shit, that's the time. If you wake up one day and you say, you know what, I'm just tired of this. I can't do this anymore. I can't hold it all together anymore. I'm done. And it often is on the precipice or at the time of a traumatic event, which is kind of what started it for me. I had a big tower moment and a really rough 7 years,
Yeah.
getting back to this point where I am today. But it has to, it's an
I have
intuitive
to
thing.
say
It has to
though,
come
I have
easy.
to say though,
Tell me.
from when you and I start working together many years ago as we went this academic journey, I'll have to say that you've made tremendous transformations and changes
Thank you.
in your life.
Thank you.
You can
As have you, Jock, even though you don't like shadow work. I
I
can
know
see it.
it's one of these things. It's like a hidden evil. I think it's like you have to do it. Like I know I have to do it, but there's elements of it that I mean, as you know, I did undercover work and I did various other different things in my life, and you face these things, and for me, there is some regret. There's regrets of the choices. There's things that would I change the elements in my nature that I don't like. And I think you're right. You get to the point where you think, "Fuck it, I've got to change it. I've just got to this is it. It's now or never." But you don't. You still have that problem. I have a massive. I guess here's the other thing. I have a massive problem with trust, as we've talked about this before. Massive problem with trust. So, do you feel then that shadow work can help with people that are suffering with elements of their nature, such as trust, or even let me go one stage further, right? I've worked with people with addictions. I've worked with people in psychosis, as people who are maybe addicted to drugs, addicted to alcohol, addicted to sex, addicted to. I've got mine who's a pastor, who's a minister, and he is a recovering sex addict, and he's open about it. Right? It'd be interesting actually ask him if he worked with his shadow nature. Do you think you're working with your shadow nature can heal or can transform addiction personalities, or break of your emotional regulation?
I think that's the key. And you said it yourself. He was addicted. He was a sex addict, right? But
Yeah,
he
I don't know
owns
if he
it.
did shadow work. I'm going to ask him that. Lee,
Must must have
if you're
done
out
shadow
there,
work.
I'm going to ask you.
Yeah, I would presume he has done the shadow work if he's owning it. You can't own something if you haven't looked if you haven't done the shadow work behind it.
Can you own it and not like it?
Of course you can. There are many aspects of my personality that I don't
I'm
like.
not weird then.
Of course you can, but that's part of it. Nobody
Yeah.
is perfect. There is no such thing as perfect. So it, perfection is only where we assign a value to it, and the shadow is there's no value. Don't attach a value to it. I mean, I think that's why people they trip up as they're going through this, because they say, oh, it's good, it's bad. It's not good or bad. It's just what it is.
Yeah, you can't label it. I find that fascinating as well. I think the problem comes in anything that we do is when we start to label something.
Absolutely.
Because a label is an energy
Yes,
and we attach an energy to it.
absolutely. No. And our shadows they're not, they may be things that we prefer, that we are not like. I can be a perfectionist at times, and sometimes I wish I wasn't so much of a perfectionist, but I own it. That's who I am. And if somebody comes up to me and says, "You're so annoying. You're such a perfectionist." Yeah, I kind of am. I just
Now,
took this dramatic character.
is that owning it just for you to admit it, or is owning it different to just admitting it?
It's part and parcel. I think they go hand in hand. A big part of it is owning it. Sometimes it's easier to work through the shadow material before you own it, depending on how painful or complicated it can be. And sometimes it's as simple as saying, no, you know what? I own it. Yes, I'm like that. I enjoy doing that. Or I enjoy being a perfectionist. I enjoy having my whole schedule planned out. And that's just who I am. And I understand that sometimes it doesn't work for other people, but it really, there's no shape in it anymore, in which case it's no longer my shadow. And that's okay.
I think there's something that I often teach as well is awareness, acceptance, and choice. You become aware of something, then you
Yes.
have to come to a level of acceptance, and then you have the choice to change it. Why would someone, when they're working with a shadow, choose not to change something they don't like? That's what I would like to get into, because is it to do with courage to change? Do we have the courage to change?
I think that's a big part of it, is having that courage. And then also how I see the shadow work is, it's like you said, acknowledging it, integrating it, and then healing from it. And it doesn't always look the same in every circumstance or with every shadow. You can acknowledge a shadow side of yourself and integrate that. I can say I'm a perfectionist. I have integrated that. I understand that. I, I'm not as much of a perfectionist. I don't hold on as steadfastly as I used to. Um,
Right.
However, I have healed from it because I understand that this is a side of me that is a little bit more, let's say, if we're talking masculine, feminine, a little more skewed on the masculine side, but it works for me in certain situations. And in the situations where it doesn't work, I'm able to release that as well. So it gives you a little
Are
bit
you
more
always
room.
working? I think this is fascinating as well. I love this conversation. Are you always working with your shadow, or do you, like, so anybody who's out there, let me know that I'm doing the thing again. I'm looking at different cameras. Let me know in the comments. So if you want to ask Arti a question, you set aside some time to work with your shadow, or have you got to the point, Arti, where, and anybody out there, let us know, share it with us, what you do, or are you working with it like all the time? Like you're just working with your shadow work all the time?
That's a really good question, Jock. Initially, when I first started, it was I sit down, I do my shadow work. It was a lot of journaling and asking myself a lot of probing questions. And then I would put it away and I would give myself some time to integrate and see how I feel about it. Now, a few years down the line, I find myself doing it all the time.
So it's
You know, I
evolved for you.
It is. It's really evolved. I mean, I'm
Yeah, I
driving down
find
the
that
street,
fascinating.
somebody cuts me off, and I start yelling. Well, why am I yelling? It's not just that somebody cut me off.
Yeah.
What is it? Why? 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 And if you
Yeah.
keep asking yourself why, you drill down to what it is that's bothering you about that. And, I'll give you an example. There was somebody that I've worked with who oops, sorry about that. Um, Somebody I worked with who I found very annoying. And there were always, this keener who would always put up their hand and want to get their 2 cents in. And I used to think, why is that type of personality always bother me? And I've been thinking about this for years and years and years. And it finally came down to, I remember when I was in high school, there was this kid who reminded me, even looked similar to this guy. And he'd always put up his hand and always be, brown nosing the teachers. And I used to, and he would get good grades because he was doing that. He wasn't really putting in the work. And my body started reacting in that way, like, oh my God, this guy is just
Right.
like that. And it turned out, you know what? It reminded me of that guy back then. And I should have, we had the top 2 grades in the class, and he got a higher grade than I did. But I know I knew the material better than he did. And it was more, kissing ass with the teacher sort of thing. And whenever I see that behavior repeated, it brings me back to that moment. I'm back in high school
Wow.
and I'm
So
acting by it.
you get triggered
I get
by it.
triggered by that. Yes, absolutely. Do I want to
You
change
wouldn't
that?
you wouldn't have realized that now hadn't you have done that hadn't you been on the journey of shadow work. So I guess it's one of these things where you start it, you've got to be aware that you're going to start becoming more aware.
You do. As much as you don't want to, it really expands your awareness. I had this. I attended one of these well-being sessions that was held by our university, and it was about the shadow. And she led us through a 10-minute meditation almost to explore our shadow side. And the interesting thing that came out of it, she asked us to share our experiences afterwards. For me, when I was faced with my shadow handed me a mirror, and it was
All
a
right.
small, and it said, "This mirror will expand as you expand." And I thought that was brilliant because that's exactly what's been happening. Initially, I could only focus on little parts of my shadow self. And now it's second nature. Everything is shadow work for me.
I think this is fascinating, right? Because there's something that I teach a lot, and I think I don't know. I think I wrote it in Deadly Departed. I'm not sure, or I wrote it in one of my articles or something. I can't remember. But see, when people are scrying back in the day, thousands of years ago or hundreds of years ago, even John Dee who scryed, and Nostradamus, and these famous scryers from many years, we seem to look at scrying as reflection, utilizing a mirror, right? And to use that mirror to tune into something. In ancient Egypt, they had the psychomantium, and the psychomantium was in a darkened room and it had a reflective surface. But the interesting thing, and I think this is something that you're saying, is in having that experience where you were handed a mirror and it would expand, mirrors were never used for reflection. Mirrors were used to go beyond into the world of spirit,
Wow.
right?
Beautiful.
So even when they were scrying, they were using a mirrored surface not to reflect, but to go beyond. So maybe that's, that's kind of indicative, a little bit of analogy of what you got in that experience is because I never look at, I mean, it's strange and using this, I used to look at a mirror just at reflection. But as I'm developing over the years and stuff like that, I now look at a mirror as a point of portal, a point of connection where you have the choice to go beyond what you see.
Yes. Yes. And some aspects of shadow work, when you get a little bit deeper into it, it does, you are asked to, there are some exercises I've seen where you're asked to look in a mirror and just stare at yourself for 10
Are you
minutes.
really? Is that? I didn't know that. That's
People
because I
can't do
don't do a lot of shadow work.
that. People can't do that. It's impossible. I couldn't do it. I don't know if I could still do it for 10 minutes. I would find it extremely difficult. But I love that analogy that it is a portal into our into
And,
our
I,
psyche.
and as we are talking as well, I can see. So in my grief community that I have, I'm going to be doing a get together, just a remembrance service that we'll do. But I'm thinking about a candle, like a candle service.
Yes.
But I'm thinking as we are talking, how the candle in a beautiful how the candle casts shadows. But in candlelight that casts shadows is beautiful.
Yes.
So maybe we need to get to the point of seeing ourselves as a candle with the
Yeah.
shadow.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I love that. That's beautiful, Jock.
And like as much as and what you're teaching me something now, you don't even realize it because the way I'm asking is that I've always thought to myself, I'm going to do shadow work. I have to, like when we're doing a LIP or we're doing a transformative process in our research, you have to take that time. And I would take that time. But it didn't feel right to me. And until now, when you said it just became part of you, maybe I've been doing shadow work without even knowing it. And until now, you telling me that as anything happens out in my daily routine or in my communications, I'm always analyzing what part of my nature is in process at the time. And I wouldn't,
Yes.
and maybe that's an element of shadow work I didn't even realize I was doing.
Yes, absolutely. I believe we all do it on a subconscious level, whether we call it shadow work or not, because we do look at things in our lives and say, "Oh, I don't want to, I don't like this." But then we only take it to a certain point because we're
Yeah.
afraid of facing that. And what's the worst that can happen? So any emotion that we feel, the worst thing that can happen, that emotion only sits in your body for about 90 seconds. That's what they've proven. However, if you
Really? So I didn't
yeah,
know. Is that really? I didn't know that myself. So 90 seconds is as
90
fast as you
seconds,
promote.
yeah, is how long you can feel that emotion when it really hits you.
Where did that come from? Is that a paper you?
I'll send it to you. I'll send you the
Oh, yeah.
paper.
See, this we're
Yeah,
getting nerdy now, ladies and gentlemen. Just to send me a paper because I'm really fascinated with this now. I guess I could probably. Do you know what? I actually should get you to come into our grief, maybe do something with our grief community as well, because I think shadow work could help in grief.
it certainly does. It certainly does. I really feel that it can help in any part of anyone's life. Um, it's just a matter of how deep you want to go. And so, what I would recommend to people who are listening out there and watching is, first of all, if you decide that you want to do shadow work, by all means, go out there, explore, investigate different avenues, find out, see what resonates with you the most. Because what works for me might not work for you, right? Jock, you and I are on the same page with many things, but our shadow work techniques could be completely different.
Yeah.
So go out there and investigate, whatever you like to use. If you like to use YouTube, look at some YouTube videos. If you like to use ChatGPT, throw them there. Um, but just sit back and watch what it comes back with. See what really calls you. And then secondly, be so kind to yourself when you're going through this process. Because the shadow work that you're doing, if you've, for example, my example of not being able to put pen to paper, and my shadow work originated from when I was 11 years old. My reactions are like, I'm 11 years old when I have to put pen to paper.
Right.
That's what the reaction is. So I have to treat myself like a child when I'm doing
Right.
that. I have to be very kind to myself. And a lot of our shadow material does come from childhood. So that kindness and
Yeah.
compassion that you would show to anyone else, show it to yourself. Because otherwise it's going to be something that you never want to touch again. And this can be done in a really safe and nurturing way.
Do you know, that's a that's quite profound that actually, because I think a lot of people they have lack of compassion for themselves.
Mm.
It's
Maybe
like I
you
always
just,
say as well, they're always looking to be forgiven or to forgive.
yes,
And in reality, you don't have to forgive anyone and you don't have to forgive yourself. That's an illusion. You have to
yeah,
forgive the judgment because it's the
yeah.
judgment that causes the suffering. So I guess as well in the shadow work, it's the judgment you have to let go of.
Absolutely. And not having compassion for yourself. There's some shadow work that needs to be done there, Jock. Maybe
Yes,
you
yeah,
maybe you weren't shown compassion at some point.
yeah. I have, if you spoke to my wife, I'd probably have a lot of shadow work to do in terms of compassion on myself.
Our
Absolutely
spouses are very good
100%.
at noticing those things.
Yeah,
Yeah.
as you've gone through this process, because obviously Sanjeev, I love, your husband, he's a great guy, but have you been able to, from what you've developed in your shadow work, that's maybe, has he noticed it? Has he been like, what are you doing? Is it made him inquisitive and the rest of your family like, wow, big changes, what can I do to,
Oh, it's
do you think
interesting.
it spreads?
Yes, absolutely. It's interesting that you ask. So one of the big motivators for me is working with. I have two children who are teenagers. One is at university, one's still in high school, and I struggle with them sometimes, and especially the younger one. And I threw up my hands one day, and I said, I can't do this anymore. And I looked at my husband and I said, I can't change her. I can barely change me. So you know what? I'm going to work on me. I'm not going to work on her anymore. And he said, okay. And so I started changing some behaviors, the way I react to her. I was trying to figure out, why does she trigger me in the ways that she triggers me? And I'm sure any parent who has children can relate to this, because our children are mirrors of our triggers, and so are our spouses. Um, and anyone who feels like, oh, I'm going to get married and have children and my shadow will disappear. No, no, you will come face to face with your shadow in a way that you have never before. And
Yeah.
it's quite frightening. And this is why many people have issues with their children, especially when they're in the teenage phase. So I did make some changes in that sense, and the outcome changed. My relationship with my daughter changed, and it's just one example of how I've, even my husband has noticed that. But just on a general
Wow.
level, in the last few years, because I have been doing so much shadow work, he's noticed a big change in me. And he noticed, he actually said to me, he said, I usually, something had happened in our house and I reacted differently. And he said, wow, that was unusual. I expected you to get upset about this, but you didn't. And I said, no, I decided that that doesn't upset me anymore. And he said, well, how can you decide that? And I said, well, no, I did shadow work behind it to find out why it was upsetting me. And my reaction changed.
Wow. That's fascinating.
I ended up losing 90% of my friends because I'm very, that's a big one in shadow
That is
work.
interesting, right? Because when you decide to take up the cross, become, so to speak, give yourself up, choosing my life of working in mediumship and afterlife work and stuff like that, you lose a lot of friends. You lose a lot of people, right?
You do.
And not that I had many to start with, but you lose it, even in connections with your family, I lose that as well. So I find that really interesting that even when you do shadow work, you're going to. Why do you think that happens, Arti, that things change and your dynamics, it changes and you lose those connections? What is it that makes that happen?
I think you're just you vibrate on a different frequency. Or
Brilliant.
mentioned before, you're more authentic, you're more true to who you are. And oftentimes in the process with shadow work, depending on what you're working on, but generally people end up with different boundaries as well. So people who love the fact that you didn't have boundaries before are obviously not going to like this new you. You literally shed your skin. You become a different person as a result of
Yeah,
doing.
it is the lobster effect. It is that
It
shed going
is.
into yourself and
It
shedding the shell and growing up another one so that you can continue your growth. And I
Yes,
guess it comes back to that whole thing. You don't know you have to grow unless you feel uncomfortable.
absolutely, absolutely. That's why it's so intuitive.
Don't forget, if you need help with your human potential, connect with our members on Holistic Therapies Directory.
Now, has this also sparked, like Sanjeev, has he wanted to do his own shadow work or?
Oh, I will leave that to him.
Hey,
Maybe
listen,
once I
Sanjeev,
write my book.
it's a work in process. If I can do it, dude, so can you.
I think to be honest with you, Jock, I think it's almost impossible for people around you,
Not to do it.
in your family, to not want to do it. They know there's a change in you, and it's always for the positive, and they're always curious, like, what's going on? How did you do that? Maybe I can do that. It inspires them, and it doesn't necessarily even have to be something that is cognitive. I noticed that in my kids. They react a little bit differently. They take a step back before reacting. They say, "Oh, well, I used to behave that way. All right." I'm not sure the exact process in their mind, but I can see the hamster going and turning in the wheel,
Yeah.
and they're moving a little bit differently. It's really quite fascinating, the impact it has on everybody around you.
You know what I also find interesting, and I find it a little bit fascinating when until I known what shadow work was, if you'd have mentioned shadow work to me, here's how the aversion would have went to me. If you'd have says, Jock, we're going to do some shadow work, I'd be like, what? Like, I'm a guy. I'm tough. We don't do that. Like, we don't do shadow. That's a new agey bollocks. No, we're not doing that. Right. But now I've come to this appreciative side of it where I get to understand it. And I think there's an element where people are still ignorant of what it is and the power of it.
Yes.
And there would be men out there. And because let's face it, a lot of people that are doing shadow work, there's mainly going to be women. And even in groups, a lot of men hide away from their grief, right? So I think there's a warrior aspect to accepting it and having this awareness and acceptance. Because had you, like I said, if you said that to me a few years ago, or a number of years ago, before we met, we met then, we're going to learn Chad, I would have been, what? Nah, you're off your head. I don't do that.
No, absolutely, because you're forced to be vulnerable, and that is
And a
not
version,
something
yeah.
that typically men like to do. Neither most women I know don't like to be vulnerable either, but they're a little bit more.
They're more open to it.
More
There's
open
no
to
doubt
it.
about it.
Yes, yes, I agree. I agree.
So let's talk a little bit about. I know we could go on. I know we've gone over time, but it don't matter. I knew this would happen, ladies and gentlemen, because when we get into really good conversations, let's talk about your research, right? Because if anybody's out there, they've got an opportunity to work with you with your research. So explain a little bit of why you chose the avenue in this particular part of your research that you're doing for your final dissertation, which is fascinating to say the least. But anybody that's out there, why you chose that, and what is the research all about, and how can anybody get involved with you?
Yes, of course. So what I decided, we're required at the end of our masters to do a dissertation. Um, and it's quite open for the most part. You can choose kind of anything you want within reason. And I
Only
really
if they like it.
yes, that's true. That's true. I struggled initially. I'll be honest. It was a little bit difficult for me to
I know. I
narrow down.
remember we had loads of conversations over
We
it. I actually
did.
remember.
We did. And we had a great conversation earlier this year, Jock, which really just propelled me into it. You reminded me of how much I loved hating shadow work. It very much a love-hate relationship with me. I don't enjoy doing it. I don't think anybody really enjoys, so to speak,
I can't say I did either.
work, but the benefits, of course, outweigh all of that.
No,
So
absolutely. Yeah.
it was obvious to me that was where I had to do my research, and I'm just so fascinated by it. And what I'm really interested in, through my own experience and through hearing other people's stories, is the somatic impact. Like, what does it do to you physically? And so, we were talking about the fascia, but I'm really fascinated by how it manifests in our bodies. I can say, after doing shadow work, not only do I feel differently, not only do I behave differently, I am physically differently. I stand taller. My shoulders are further back. I walk with confidence, and I believe it shows. I've had many people say to me, "You've changed," even without having spoken a word. "You've changed. What's different about you? Did you change your hair? Did you change your?" No, I'm different
It's
on the inside.
interesting.
It shows on the outside. Yeah.
Do you know
So
what it's helped me with?
I'm sorry.
Do you know what it's helped me with?
Tell me.
I can now sleep in a complete pitch black room.
Wow.
I have never been able to do it.
No way.
And primarily because when I was in the military, I was the only Scotsman in this particular regiment, and guys got into my room at 2, 3 in the morning and just beat me to within an inch of my life, really, and I went AWOL. And ever since that time, I was always aware. And then, of course, my working bodyguard work in high-risk security operations, I always had to be my awareness level, situational awareness was just out one berserk.
Yeah.
But I think going through the process of fighting with my emotion and then accepting it and then working with that shit, I could never ever sleep in a darkened room. Never. So my wife helped me through. I had PTSD. My wife helped me through that with meditation and understanding it. I could never sleep in a dark. I always had to have my wits about me and see light. And doing that type of work, my body feels accepted and safe that I can actually now sleep in a completely pitch black room.
Wow. That's
And that's
fascinating.
only within the last few years, really. And I'm
That's
50
incredible.
something now.
There you go. You've been doing your shadow work, Jock.
Wait, I didn't even know it. I didn't even know it.
Yes.
But
Did you?
I think it's that powerful though. So carry on. So this is the element that you're really interested in your
Yes. So
research is
this is
how
what
it
I'm going
works in
to
the body.
expand. So what I want to understand, and I'm doing phenomenological research on this. So I want to understand the lived experience of people who have done the shadow work in the last couple of years, and if they noticed any somatic effects, has anything changed in their body? Do they feel differently? Because it's not just about gathering evidence and numbers, but I really want to understand what is making this change. How does it feel to different people, and how do they articulate that? What words are they using to describe that? That's what fascinates me. I think in truly understanding the impact of shadow work, you have to understand how people not only interpret it, but how they find meaning in it.
Right. Yeah, I think that's something that escapes a lot of people is how would they find meaning in the shadow work? And I guess it's something I'm even trying to still figure out how I find meaning in it. So how can people get involved with your research now?
So I am actually recruiting research participants right now. So anyone who is any adults, English speaking adults, who would be willing to have a video interview with me for about an hour and a half, I would love to talk to you if you've um, embarked on shadow work in the last couple of years and noticed any physical changes that have gone along with that. Uh, or it could even be because of your physical, because of your, what's the word I'm looking for? Anything that's happening to you physically has prompted
Yeah.
you to do the shadow work. It can be vice versa as well. I'd be really interested in talking to you, and I will share my contact details with Jock to add onto this podcast.
So anybody who's part of our holistic network, obviously you're going to get this in your email news in our email. You're going to get this, so you'll be able to connect with that. But also beyond this, in YouTube and all the podcast platforms, we'll have a link that you can connect with Arti direct and help her out with this research. I think it's absolutely fascinating. Like I've said, ladies and gentlemen, it's not something I enjoy. It's something that I've learned even from this conversation. I've learned that I've probably been doing a lot more than I think.
Yes.
And while I'm still have a bit of trepidation around it, I'm getting more comfortable with it. I do see the benefits of it. And if you're a guy that out there, set aside the machismo attitude and really work on yourself, work on your shadow nature. Arti, it's been an absolute pleasure having
Thank you
you
so much,
on
Jock,
here
for having me on.
and having and your first podcast episode,
First
not
podcast.
the last. I want to get you for people that I want to get you to Artie's. I've been pushing her to do this for ages, but Artie's going to come and do a class, an introduction to shadow work, shadow nature, that kind of stuff. We'll have it available in the Holistic Network, but also we'll have it available publicly. And who knows, maybe Artie will have a course out soon as well that you'll be able to purchase that at some point. We're going to push it to do that as well. But um, anybody who really is interested, I would say to connect with you because your lived experience is that there's many people out there that learn from theory and they
Yes.
teach things from theory from a book. I always prefer to learn from people who have gone through it, that have had the lived experience to share that. So I want to thank you for being my guest on Optimizing Human Potential. I want to invite you as well to come and talk about shadow work and grief on Pillars of Grief and also in my community. I think there's so much benefit to the work that you're doing. Especially from even carrying on from Vandervolt's work, looking at shadow nature somatically in the body. I think it's fascinating. And what's the final words that you would give to anybody out there, Artie, that's really interested in this?
If you have any questions, obviously you can contact me, but do it. If you're interested in shadow work, be kind to yourself. Don't start this when you're not, because it won't go the way that it won't go in a positive way. Um, and B, follow your intuition. Let that be your guide.
Yeah,
And there are so many resources out there for you to be able to take advantage of, but make it a curated experience for yourself.
absolutely. Artie, Thank you. This has been
Thank you, Jock.
fascinating, and we could go on and on and on and on, but I'm mindful of people want to listen. But Arti will definitely be back as my guest. And if there's something that you want to know about shadow work, then let us know, because I can bring her back on and we can have another discussion and you can ask any questions that you have. Arti, thank you for joining me. Ladies and gentlemen, take care of yourself. And then, as Arti said, be compassionate with yourself, especially if you're doing shadow work. God bless.
We really hope you enjoyed this episode of the Optimizing Human Potential podcast by the Holistic Therapies Directory. Stay connected with us directly through holistictherapiesdirectory.com. You can also join us on Instagram at Holistic Therapies Directory. You can also live chat with us on the site or join our Facebook group at Holistic Network. Thank you for pushing your mindset towards a better reality. This concludes the most thought-provoking portion of your day or evening. Don't forget to like and subscribe to stay fully up to date. Until next time, don't let your belief in what you can do get in the way of what you can do.